Hello and welcome everyone to Genetics, Biology 326. This is a very exciting time to be studying genetics. We live in a society today where we're learning more and more about our genomes and about the genomes of organisms that surround us. Understanding genetics will help us in whatever profession we decide to go into, and it will also help us as citizens, because many of the things that we will encounter in society and at voting booths and as we talk with family and friends and peers will be enhanced by your knowledge of genetics. So before we start talking about genetics in great detail, let's kind of give a quick overview of how we're going to approach genetics this semester. In general terms, we're going to start with the molecule first, the DNA molecule. We'll talk a lot about this molecule. We'll talk about how we know it's the genetic material of life for most organisms. We'll talk about how it's constructed. We'll talk about rules that help regulate its shape and how the structures in it, the components of the DNA molecule will help us create specific traits through the process of making messenger RNA and proteins and other RNA molecules. As I said just a moment ago, will help develop traits, and I'm just going to draw a person here. So the traits that this makes this person or any organism is all because of the DNA and the environment. So we have traits here. And these traits, as I said, I'll repeat it real quick here, are the result of the DNA plus the environment. Now this process of going from DNA to traits, we can lump that up into one large category, which we'll call molecular genetics. The next thing we're going to be interested in is how are these traits from this organism, in this case a stick figure, how are they passed on to the next generation? So let's just draw smaller stick figures to indicate progeny that are produced. And so let's write inheritance here. How do we pass these traits on to the next generation? And we call this process here Mendelian genetics. Or sometimes we may call it transmission genetics. That is the rules that help govern how specific genes, which encode traits, are passed on to the next generation. Now over time, some of these traits are going to have certain advantages for that particular organism. Because even though I drew these all as one color, we know that over time, organisms that are produced, they will share many similarities to their parents, but they will also begin to look different as well. And this variation within this population is what allows for evolution to occur. And understanding these rules and understanding how certain traits can become more predominant in a population is what we call the branch of population genetics. So throughout this semester, we're going to begin talking about molecular genetics, and then we'll move into Mendelian or transmission genetics, talking about how traits are passed on, and then we'll begin to talk about how these traits and how they're inherited and how they generate variation and diversity within a population, how that can lead to evolution in the field of population genetics. I'm going to erase these top lines up here, letters I mean, and along the side here. And I want to remind you, while we're talking about all the rules and the regulations of genetics in these three branches of genetics, we're going to talk about it in context of a variety of life. So we'll talk about it in relation to bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. We don't know as much about archaea, but we will touch on that when we can. We'll also talk about genetics in relation to evolution, disease and health, and how this all affects society. Okay, now that I've explained to you the general content that you're going to be exposed to in genetics this semester, and some of the broader pictures of genetics, I want to take a few moments here to explain to you some of the differences that you'll experience in this class as opposed to a traditional lecture course. The model that we will be using in this class is a model that's loosely based on a concept called flipped, and we'll use something called team-based learning. In your syllabus, I provided a short website that you could go to that kind of explains how we flip a classroom and why students in a flipped classroom tend to learn the material better. Now, to explain what I mean by flipped classroom and by team-based learning, I'm going to draw a little diagram. As with most classes, and this class will be no exception, you will learn some things outside of class, and you will learn things inside of class. The way this course will work is that before you come to class, you will need to prepare. And what I mean by that is before you come to class, you will be asked to read from your textbook. So you'll have assigned readings. Now, what I have learned is that many of the textbooks that are used are pretty dense. There's a lot of material in it, and it's hard for a student to read that material for the first time and be able to pull out exactly what it is you need to know. It would be unfair for me to say, read chapter 5 and tell me what's important in it. So to help you with your readings that you're going to do on your own, I'm going to provide you with a couple of tools that will help break it down for you. The first thing is that I will provide you with note-taking guides. And in a moment, I'm going to show you where you find these at on Blackboard. So note-taking guides. And these note-taking guides will direct you to the pages that you need to read, and they will ask you specific questions about that material to help pull out what you need to know. And more importantly, the depth that you need to know the material. Because sometimes there's a lot more information in a textbook than I'm asking you to know. So it'll help you with the depth. Also, to help you with the depth and to help make the material a little bit more understanding, I will provide podcasts. The podcasts are just like you see here. And if you're watching this, you were able to find this on Blackboard without my help. For each class, you will have between 1 and 3 podcasts. Each podcast is roughly 15-20 minutes long. And it will go over the note-taking guides. Now, sometimes there will be things in the note-taking guides that aren't on the podcasts. There will be some things that you will need to kind of break down on your own. But most of the things you'll find are on the podcasts. As you're learning the material, I think it would be best to have your book open, have your note-taking guide out so you can fill those in, and watch the podcast. And that way you'll be able to fill in all the gaps. Now, what happens when you come into class is where the team-based learning comes into play. And I'm just going to write this as TBL for team-based learning. The first thing you'll do when you come to class, every class except for days when we have exams, is you will take a quiz. I'm going to put an I by this for now. That just means it's an individual quiz. You'll take this one completely on your own. Then you will retake that quiz, the exact same quiz, same questions, same answers, all that good stuff, but you'll take it with your group. This will take about the first quarter of the class. The remainder of the class is time that we will spend working on activities. The idea of this approach is that you will come to class knowing some of that basic knowledge, and so that we can break down that material and work on the activities, the actual application of that material, the kinds of things you will find on your exams. We feel it's better that you learn that material in class where you can ask questions and work with other students, because that's a higher level learning, as opposed to having to struggle with that on your own. I should mention a little bit about these activities. These activities may just be advanced problems. We may work on cases and other kinds of applications of the material. Now, after class, after you've completed these quizzes and activities, there will be a homework. Now, in this class, your homework will be delivered to you through the publisher's online learning material. So this is more problems, but it's going to be assessing how well you have learned this material. If you can, the best time to do this homework is shortly after class, sometime that day. And then what we do is we start the cycle over again. You will prepare for class by doing additional readings, filling out additional note-taking guides, and watching additional podcasts. And then you'll come back to class, and we repeat the cycle with a new TBO. As we go through this first week of classes, it'll become more clear how these different things come together. But what I'd like to do now is take a few moments to go to Blackboard and show you where you can find all of these tools. Okay, this is what your Blackboard Shell should look like for this course. It's like most Blackboard Shells that you've worked with in the past, but I want to point out some specific tools. First, let's look at daily course material. I'll open up a folder that includes all of the days for any given exam when that unit comes up. But right now, the material for exam 1 can be seen on your Blackboard. And I'm just going to click on day 2 as an example. You'll see a few things associated with day 2. You'll see this note-taking guide. Let me go ahead and click on this and spend a little bit of time talking about what the note-taking guides are. And I set the note-taking guides up in such a way that when you're done with the note-taking guide, you have an effective study guide. And as you can see in this particular note-taking guide, there are 3 objectives. In bold in this column here, or down here, these are the main concepts from these different objectives that you need to know. Over here, not in bold, but in italics, this is where you'll take notes based upon what this term is. So for instance, let's do allele. Now you can print this off and handwrite it in if you'd like, or you can just type right here on the computer. So allele, these are variations of genes. Within a population, there are many different alleles for each gene. And then you fill in the rest of these. I'm not going to check these. I can check them if you bring them up to me because you're confused about something. But in general, this is your tool to use to study for quizzes and exams. Over here, this is a place where you can ask a question to yourself so that when you study in groups or you come to my office hours, you can remember to ask me. For instance, you might say, I didn't understand genetic variation. So talk about that in your groups, talk to me about it so you understand it, but this is a good place to make a note of something you didn't understand. Or you might say, problem 3 made no sense. So you know to go back. Down here is the summary. This isn't as crucial to fill out. Sometimes students fill it out, sometimes they don't. But you may, at the end of writing all these terms down and all the concepts down, you may want to summarize what you just wrote in 1 to 2 sentences to convince yourself that you understand what's being explained here. In the end, what you should do is print this off if you'd like, or just keep it on your computer and use this as a study guide. The quizzes that you take every day will come directly from this note-taking guide. Now, to help you with the note-taking guides, I will have podcasts for each day. Depending on the day, you will see between 2 and 4 podcasts. And if you're watching this podcast, you probably have already discovered how to do these podcasts. But let's just click on one of them. And it will take you to a YouTube page showing the video. And the video, I'll just fast forward here a little bit, will outline what you need to know for that day and how it's linked to the note-taking guide. I encourage you as you're going through these to not just watch them, but to write down what I write down, and then use this as you study for the quizzes and the exams. Students in the past who have done well in this course have told me that they spend a lot of time writing down what I write down on these podcasts, and as I just said, using those for study tools. Okay, let's now look at lab worksheets. You'll see that we have lab worksheets for each lab day. Some labs, like the lab associated with Lab 1, there's nothing for you to print off. Everything you need for Lab 1 will be provided for you in Lab. However, for Lab 2, you'll see there are 3 different files for you. I will typically tell you which ones you need to open and print off, and which ones are just there for your reference. So in Lab 2, you need to print off Drosophila mutant worksheet and the mutant name worksheet. The PowerPoint is just for your reference. So make sure you look at each day of lab and see what you need to print off for that lab. Next, let's look at exams. There's nothing in here quite yet, but we will take our exams online using a Respondus lockdown browser. And I'll explain in more detail how we download that browser and how we will take exams this semester. But you will access them through this link right here. Here you will see the final exam study guide. So let's go ahead and click on that. You'll see the format of the final exam. This breaks down the material from each day of the semester that will be on the final exam. So it is cumulative, but there are some days that are highlighted on the exam and other days that are not included. You'll also see this list of keywords. Part of the final exam will be a fill in the blank using these keywords. So when we come across these words throughout the semester, it would be a good idea to jot down notes about each of these. Maybe go ahead and make up a set of note cards with 60 words on them and begin filling those out as you move throughout the semester, so this doesn't hit you right at the end of the semester. We can go here now to iClicker instructions. If you click on this link, it will give you a Word document that will walk you through what you need to do to register your iClicker. Most of you probably already have an iClicker, and if you do, you shouldn't have to re-register it. We should be able to just use that from your previous registration. If you have a new iClicker, you will need to register it. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is our homework system we're going to use this semester, and this is something called Sapling Plus. So after you registered for it, you can click on that Sapling Plus link, and it will take you to your course here. Okay, so what I would encourage you to do is to go to activities and due dates. I don't have anything available for you yet, but we can look at this practice assignment. So whatever your assignment is, you can click on it right there. It will list the questions you have here, and what you will do is you will answer these questions here. Click it, then you will hit check answer. And it will tell you if you're correct. And if you're correct, you hit next, and it'll take you to the next question. Let's say you're looking at this question here and you don't want to answer it quite yet. You can skip to the next question. You will have some questions where you will have to place the words in different categories. So for instance, this one, green, let's actually miss some of these and see what happens when we submit. Check answer. It will give you a description of why you missed it and try to give you a hint to lead you down the correct path. Then you'll get a try again. Every time you try, there will be a deduction, so try to get it right on the first attempt. You can also hit a hint, and it will try to give you a hint. Now, to be honest, sometimes the hints are very helpful, and sometimes the hints aren't quite so helpful. But there's no penalty in clicking a hint, so go ahead and do that if a question confuses you. I want to show you this example here because this should be a visual cue that you get used to. When you see answer choices that are circles like this, that means only one answer is necessary. Now when you see squares as the answer choices, that means that more than one answer should be selected. So in this one here, these three would be the correct answer. And getting the correct answer, sometimes it will give you some feedback like this one did. Alright. I think once you get started, these will be pretty self-explanatory. The other thing you should look at are the grades. Now, here are your grades, and it'll tell you each of the grades you have, the percentage you got correct. And at the very bottom here, it will give you the average of your grade. Next, if you click on Resources, you'll see that some chapters have different kinds of animations that you might find helpful. If you click on these and hit play, it will walk you through various concepts. I encourage you to look at these, particularly, I think, with the molecular aspect of genetics that we cover in the first part of the semester. Last thing I want to show you is the e-textbook here. The purchase of Sapling Plus comes with the e-text, as I've mentioned in previous emails. So if you click on this, it takes you to the ebook. And I think as far as ebooks are concerned, this is one of the better ones I've seen. So we'll just look here at Chapter 2. And it looks just like your textbook as you might see it. You can move from page to page and read the different sections. Now, if you're reading a particular section in the textbook, you can always, and you want to come back to it, or you think there's something important there, you can hit bookmark, and it'll remember that. And then over here, you click bookmark, and it'll pull up all the bookmarks that you have. You can also highlight things. So if you wanted to highlight a prokaryote is a unicellular organism, you can highlight it just like this after you've hit the highlight here. And then it'll remember which things you've highlighted. so that at the end of a particular section or a chapter or at the end of the semester, you can see all the different parts of the textbook that you highlighted, and you can quickly jump to them. You also have this feature here called search, and so just like any search function, you can type in a phrase you're looking for here. So for instance, maybe you forgot what helicase does, and so you type in helicase, and it'll show you the 50 places in the textbook where helicase is mentioned, and you can read the general section where they're at and then click on it, and it'll take you right to the section you want to see. So in general, I think this is a pretty useful textbook, ebook. All right, when you're done with the ebook, you can click this button here and it'll take you back to the sapling course. And now we're back to where we started. All right, I think that's all I want to say about the Sapling Plus website, but if you have any questions or problems with it, please let me know. And I think that's all I want to say about Blackboard as well. All I have for this first podcast for Biology 326 Genetics. If you have any questions before the first day of class, please make sure you send me a quick email or stop by my office. If not, I'll see you in class.